That's a hard question. You can't teach people to trust. This is, I think, one of the reasons these subjects are dismissed as fluffy or unnecessary, is because they are inherently feelings. Trust is a feeling. That's what it is. Feelings. But that's what it is. Trust is a feeling, as is loyalty. These are feelings that we have towards people or organizations. And so, like all feelings, it's positive feelings. They have to be earned, and they evolve, and they take a series of actions to prove that you are worthy of trust. And so, no matter how excited you are to start a new job, no matter how excited they are to have you, you don't feel a part of the company immediately. It just doesn't happen. You don't know the language, you don't know the customs, you don't know the traditions, you don't fit in quite yet, they don't really know who you are. And over the course of time, little by little, you'll do little things, you'll put yourself out for others. Little by little, they'll give you a little more and a little more. And over the course of 6, 7, 8, 9 months, you'll actually start to feel like, I belong here, I feel like it, If you go years without feeling like you belong, you probably don't. Trust is not something that can be dictated. Trust me, or trust each other. Cooperate. Why don't you guys, if you guys cooperate, we'll have some more. It's not how it works. It's environmental.
Yeah.
It's always environmental.
And for organizations that lack that environmental trust, how do you help organizations turn that around?
It comes from the commitment to leadership. Leaders determine the environment. Leaders determine how big and how porous the circle of safety is. You take a look at a company like Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs, back in the 70s and 80s, they were the Boy Scouts of Wall Street. That's what they referred to as. They believed in something called long-term greed, which is it's okay to make money, but they had this long perspective. And they were renowned for doing the right thing and sometimes taking short-term losses because it was the right thing to do. That was their culture, And through a series of poor management decisions and then going public, exaggerated some of those things, they no longer put as much weight on evaluating someone's cultural fit when making the hire. And now you had the sort of trader mentality started to, take hold inside the culture. And what you started to see was the disintegration of a high values culture, where it was no longer about protecting the reputation and protecting each other. It was now about protecting myself and advancing myself. And we've seen what's happened. They played a role in what we've seen happen to the economy. Because without a circle of safety, what happens is we inherently concern ourselves with our own survival. Biologically, we become cynical, we become selfish, and we become paranoid. That's what happens when we don't feel trust. When you don't trust somebody who that you live with, when you don't trust somebody in a relationship, you become paranoid that everything they're doing is trying to hurt you. We become cynical of everything they say. We become self-interested. We start doing things to protect ourselves and building walls. Well, it's the exact same thing inside organizations. When we do not feel safe, we will do things to protect ourselves, which will ultimately damage and hurt the culture and the company.
So not only is he an interesting leadership philosopher, but I thought that clip was important because it describes, there's a lot going on there. It describes kind of how silos happen, right? People don't feel trust, so they think, oh, I gotta keep everything encapsulated. I gotta keep us to ourselves. And we do that as individuals. Also, he said how trust cannot be taught, that it's a feeling. It is a feeling. So when we're talking about all of these aspects of building trust, you can't dictate to your team or to a department, trust me. It doesn't happen that way. It happens through your own behaviors, through people realizing that they can build this feeling of trust. And it's not based on logic or it being dictated. So, and he also talked about how it starts with leadership. So you've heard leadership at lunch and throughout the day talk about some things that we're dedicated to, and we're hoping that everyone can come along, for that ride. Zarir was talking about a couple of components in the journey, and we've visited the journey a couple times today as well. But we are in a time of change, which can be really, really difficult. And you heard Zubair say that we're all culture keepers. And when you're in a time of change, it can be really difficult for everyone to figure out, exactly what's happening, what's going on. That's why we're having trainings like this. That's why Zubair is also dedicated to having a town hall meeting once a year. That's why you can communicate with us on Collaborate or send us an email, because we want to, if people are wondering or curious, to communicate what those things are. And that everyone here is a culture keeper and responsible for those values. Are you wondering what those values are? Look at the culture competency models, because those models were built from information existing long before any ELT member came here, but we also added where we really, really want to go. So it's kind of a blending of that information. So if you're curious about our core values, look to the culture competency models. So one of the things you've also been exposed to has been forming a just culture, just as in justice. And this also applies to, you've heard it probably within the safety and ops message, but it also applies to people as well, to people and relationships and managing people. So you can manage people in a punitive culture. This is managing via baseball bat or stick, right? And you can get some things done that way, but you can't sustain getting things done in punitive culture. It's not going to last for very long. People will tire of it, they'll leave, they'll become angry. Usually they become passive aggressive, and so they may not actually resist in ways that are visible, but they resist in ways that are invisible or covert. So you can certainly lead or manage or be a leader that way. Or you could lead on this end of the spectrum, the opposite, the no blame culture. And in the no blame culture, which seems more like Herschel does it, it's, anything goes, I'll give you a long leash, hopefully the problems will go away. There's really no accountability there, and things are just become the wild, wild west then, after a while. Well, where after is a just culture. And this is not just related to safety, it's also related to being a manager or supervisor of others, where you hit this balance between holding people accountable and empowering them. Holding people accountable and empowering them. And that's really what the best leaders do. And also in this just culture and tied to it, you can be assured that you would come to another department, let's say it is HR talent, and that you can report something or discuss something, talk about something, and that it will be kept confidential and at the same time be followed up on. Just culture doesn't only apply to the safety ops message we've heard, but really goes across the organization in other ways as well, including the people aspect. We talked before about the golden rule, which most everyone knows, treat others the way you'd like to be treated. When we're talking about our clients and customers, we need to follow the platinum rule. Platinum is more valuable than gold monetarily. And not everyone knows the platinum rule. The platinum rule takes you out of the equation entirely, has nothing to do with you, and completely just says the platinum rule means treat others the way they want to be treated. Treat others the way they want to be treated. So when you think of your clients or our passengers or a client or customer group that you have, following the platinum rule, there's no coincidence that this is fitted into a fortune cookie. There's a lot of hard concrete research that says organizations that follow the platinum rule enjoy good fortune. So organizations that treat their customers the way they want to be treated, that treat their employees the way they want to be treated, have customers that return and employees that stay, and this increases revenue. Leaders, bosses, supervisors who treat others the way that they want to be treated also give returns to their own brand and perspectives as a boss, which increases the boss and managers career and all of those things Karen talked about. When leaders are trusted, the dividends are many, even in life, not just in work. So this is the platinum rule. I do want to use the caveat that this does not mean the employee is always right. This does not mean the customer is always right. And there are times when customers and employees do not follow the golden rule. They are misbehaving. There are also times when employees and customers need to be educated. Part of being a manager and part of being a service provider is that you might actually know more about the service than they do. So this does not mean the same thing as the customer is always right, the employee is always right, because sometimes they need to be educated and sometimes they are not being, respectful. And those are different situations, certainly. We've all been in those situations. But that happens with managers and bosses too. We probably can all list manager bosses, boss situations where they also were not following the golden rule. So think about it for just a moment. If you're someone who does not directly work with a passenger every single day, who is your customer? Who relies on you to get the work done? I'll tell you that in some other manager-supervisor classes, one of the most difficult realizations that we had in this class was, a scheduler realizing that the client was crew. And sometimes they don't like crew very much. Sometimes the interactions are rough, tough, and they really don't get along. But they're each other's clients. They depend on each other. Without the scheduler's work, the crew member cannot get their schedule, which they really, really, really want. And without the crew member's work, the schedulers can't get the aircraft covered, basically. They're interdependent on each other. They're each other's clients, even if sometimes they don't really like the fact that they are each other's clients. So who's your client? Who here at the airline is impacted or involved in the work you do? Is there anyone who cannot do their job without you first doing yours? If that's the case, then you serve them. You serve them. So, think about that component in, I just want to make sure that's okay. So think about that component. It might be a new angle or a new way of thinking about the work that you do, because all of us in the travel, tourism, hospitality, airline industry love to romanticize. We love to glamorize and think that we all ultimately work, for our passenger or guest. And yes, we do. But day in, day out, we may not at all. We may not at all. So, quality execution, we're talking about your client, your guest. What does that mean? For Herschel, he's asking himself, who is my client? I don't work directly with the people who are sitting on the airplane every single day. I'm not a flight attendant. I'm not a call center reservationist. I'm not a station agent. What does this mean? Who actually is my client?